He didn't say that. And it's
Is
not Russia that's foot dragging. It's Ukraine that's foot dragging. It's Ukraine that is the problem. And it's Ukraine that the United States would walk away from. So we need to frame this issue correctly here. The problem is Ukraine has always been Ukraine and will always be Ukraine. Russia is not the problem. Russia is the solution. Russia is the solution either diplomatically, if Ukraine will agree to the terms that Russia is dictating. And why do I say Russia is dictating? Because to the victor goes the spoils. Russia's winning this war. Russia has won this war. Russia will win this war. It's over for Ukraine. The United States apparently doesn't have what it takes to bring Ukraine to heel. It's a political problem. It's nothing else. We could shut Ukraine down today, and I think if we walk away from this, we will be shutting Ukraine down, and that'll just hasten the Russian military victory. But the problem is Ukraine, 100% Ukraine. The problem is Zelensky. And to be frank, the problem is Rubio. Why is Marco Rubio sticking his nose into something he has no involvement in? I mean, Rubio's job is to improve diplomatic relations between Russia and the United States. That's the mandate he's been given. His job is not to negotiate anything to do with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and conflict termination. That's Steve Witkoff's purview. The moment I hear Witkoff talking about the United States walking away, I'll pay attention. The moment I hear Donald Trump talking about the United States walking away, I'll pay attention. When I hear Marco Rubio talk about it, what I hear is a neoconservative Russia hater who didn't want to be involved in this to begin with, trying to wash his hands of something that he finds distasteful. But I really don't really give a damn about what Rubio says, nor should anybody else, because it, frankly speaking, doesn't matter. He doesn't get to call the shots. He's not a shot caller. He's not a shot maker. He's nothing, especially when it comes to Russia and American relations.
what do you think is the balance of power within the Trump administration between people like Steve Witkoff or Trump himself, who would be serious about a peace negotiation with Russia, and on the other hand, I would assume people like Marco Rubio and Keith Kellogg, who seem to be neocon hardliners when it comes to the question of Russia?
Well, ultimately, there's only one boss, and that's Donald Trump. What we see, though, is that within the Trump administration, there appears to be a relatively even split between those people who want to do what Donald Trump wants to do and those people who are diametrically opposed to what Donald Trump wants to do. We have Tulsi Gabbard, we have J.D. Vance, we have Pete Hegseth, we have Steve Witkoff. They appear to be on the side of Donald Trump. We have Marco Rubio, we have Waltz, we have Kellogg, and maybe even the Secretary of Treasury, who appear to be these hardline neoconservatives who, have their own agendas. This is the problem that Trump creates when he surrounds himself with people who aren't loyal. He says he wants to get rid of the deep state. Then why do you promote the deep state? But there's an even split here. But the real question is Trump man enough to go against 50% of his cabinet? And so far, the answer appears to be no. That when it comes to a split like this, Trump, ends up trying to straddle the fence, and nothing gets accomplished, and everything he wants to get accomplished gets undermined.
Does the Congress matter to any extent in this, given Republican senators led by people like Lindsey Graham are moving bipartisan bills for further sanctions on not just Russia, but even countries that trade with Russia with the threat of secondary sanctions? Do they matter at all?
Well, theoretically. I mean, the United States is, after all, a nation that has checks and balances defined by the Constitution. And, the Congress is, of course, an equal and a separate and equal branch of government. So one should think they matter. But Congress doesn't get to dictate executive policy. Only the executive gets to do that. And Lindsey Graham needs to be careful about getting ahead of his skis here, or else he can find himself cut off. This is not a strong Congress. This is not a Congress that has shown an ability to speak with its own voice. And, I think if push comes to shove, Lindsey will be given a special audience with the president and change his tune.
Scott, if you could tell us a little bit about the situation in ground, given the mainstream media has been discussing a lot about the Russian attacks on Kharkiv, on Sumy, on Kyiv, and President Trump himself spoke about loss of 2,000 lives every week. Can you give us a sense of what is going on the ground?
Sure. I'll just start though that pronunciation has an impact as well. Uh, if you say Kyiv, you're speaking with a Ukrainian point of view. It's Kiev. It's always been Kiev. If you say Kyiv, you're saying I support Ukraine. It's just an important thing because there's people out there who listen to these things and they and it resonates. Um, and it also has people wonder what the purpose of your question is then if you're taking a Ukrainian slant, or how my answer will be since I obviously take a Russian slant. But pronunciation does matter. Um, Russia, what are you talking about? I don't understand the question. Russia is carrying out strategic attacks as it always has been. Attacks against critical infrastructure, attacks against command and control, attacks against industrial facilities. What's different today than last week?
I guess the question is would Ukraine be able to hold on for any longer? Can this status quo go on? I think that's the bigger question.
Uh, you know, people have been predicting the downfall of Ukraine for some time now. I count myself in that number. I'm surprised that Ukraine has lasted as long as it has. Um, Clearly, Ukraine has resilience, and resilience that's propped up with hundreds of billions of dollars of foreign assistance. Um, I would say that I don't believe Ukraine can do this indefinitely. I don't think anybody believes Ukraine can do this indefinitely, but I'm not going to put a timetable on the collapse of Ukraine. I'm just saying that Ukraine is collapsing. Its collapse is inevitable. Um, and you're starting to hear more and more panicked um, verbiage coming out of Kiev from the Ukrainian government as they wonder how they're going to, move forward, what kind of support they need, air defense, money. I mean, there's some ridiculous things being said there about, what I guess they want the new German government to amend the Constitution so it has to give 5% of its defense spending to Kiev and give 5% of its budget to Kiev. Um, it, this shows desperation. Ukraine is not sustainable on its own. And if the United States walks away, Ukraine will collapse a heck of a lot faster than it currently is collapsing. One of the important things to note is that Kiev has acknowledged that it is 100% reliant upon U.S. intelligence in terms of Russian missile um, launch notifications. That if the United States shuts down its intelligence sharing, Kiev will be 100% blind, meaning that the Russian missiles will hit and Kiev will never have any indication of when they're coming. And that's part and parcel of the downfall.
I think given among the three impediments, we have talked about two, of course, Ukraine itself as impediment to the talks, and then the sections of those in the United States, including those within the Trump administration that acts as an impediment. I think the third important element here is Europe, and we have discussed this. You have spoken about it. I think my question here is, given the U.S. EU relationship being reconstructed through at least the tariff negotiations, some people are speculating that if these renegotiations between the United States and EU along on the question of tariff do not go well, and there is a delinking between the United States and Europe, then that would mean that Europe would continue to support Kiev, and that would be a backstep towards the negotiations. Do you think that a stronger bond between the United States and Europe would mean stronger leverage of the United States to force Europe into this negotiation, or do you think a delinking would perhaps be better?
Delinking or destruction. Um, you know, just because the current state of the governance in Europe is dysfunctional, um, doesn't mean that the United States needs to divorce itself from Europe. All we have to do really is just wait, and Europe will cleanse itself. We see in Romania the potential just next month of earth-shattering results. Right now, you have England and France talking irresponsibly about what they could do in the future, even though they can't do it. Nothing they talk about is viable, doable, but they pretend that it is. But in order for this fantasy to even begin to resonate as possible, you have to have Romania in play. You have to be able to use Romanian ports, Romanian airfields, Romanian bases. But in the next election, if the party of Georgescu, even though he's off the ballot, the party of Georgescu prevails, Romania is taken off the map. And that's the end of that. Um, Germany right now is, of course, Merz coming in and or Wirtz coming in and flexing his non-existent muscles, as if he's going to be able to do something. He's not. The German economy can't sustain anything that he's talking about. I don't know if the German electorate would even allow this to be manifested for any length of time. I would imagine that he will suffer a vote of no confidence within a year. And the amazing thing is, while the last election had Alternative for Deutschland coming in second place, today it's leading. And if there were snap elections held today, Alternative for Deutschland would win. And give it a year, it will win decisively, a majority, a governing majority. Germany's off the map. France, the ridiculous persecution of Marine Le Pen. Even if she is taken off the ballot, her party is now positioned to take down Emmanuel Macron. And this could happen sooner rather than later. Again, because of a vote of no confidence, you could see a dramatic shift in the parliament in France this summer that would perhaps cause Macron to have to resign. So we could see a dramatic change in the politics in France. France is off the board. England, well, I mean, I don't know if Keir Starmer stops kissing his male butler, maybe there'll be some stability there, but I think he's history as well for any number of reasons. And that puts the UK off the board. What do we have left? Nothing. So Europe is a joke. The United States just needs to wait it out. But the other thing is we have a lot of leverage. We're already, no matter what, going to defund NATO. We're going to withdraw. The level of support that we've had. You're going to see troops withdrawn from NATO in the near future. We've already said we're not participating in next year's major exercises. NATO can't have major exercises without the United States, by the way. So that means that NATO now is a defunct military alliance, because if you can't train, you can't fight. They can't fight anyways, but they're not going to be able to fake it on the training ground. So I don't see the sanctions or the tariff negotiations have anything to do with the reality of NATO. If Europe was smart, they'd divorce themselves from Ukraine right now and just focus on trying to make better with the United States economically, because geopolitically and in terms of the military, it's over. We're done with Europe. We're finished with Europe. And one of the main reasons is because Europe can't sustain itself. We're not in the business of writing Europe checks anymore so they can fake it. They're going to either have to make it or they're going to collapse. And I think the future is European collapse.
Would the worsening relationship between the United States and China would have any impact or bearing on this negotiation with Russia?
I think the only thing that has an impact on the negotiation with Russia is Russia. Russia has set down terms of conflict termination. If the United States can arrange so that those terms are met, then there will be successful negotiations. If the United States can't, there won't be. And there's no other factor. Russia's made it clear that China's not even a part of this negotiation. The U.S.-China relations totally separate issue. And Russia has said that the United States will not drive a wedge between Russia and China either. That the two nations are very close. So I think I think Trump's going to find out that he may have bit off more than he can chew with China, and they're going to have to find a way to de-link their problems with China from everything else they're trying to accomplish. But that's going to be almost impossible to do given the global reach of the Chinese economy. But again, that's a separate issue altogether. As far as Russia and Ukraine, China has no impact in it whatsoever.
How important is the deal for Russia? On one hand, it seems that Russia has found a sort of economic stability. Its reserves are all-time high, fueled by the surge in gold prices, and this has come despite the freezing of 322 billion, as calculated by Bloomberg, of Russian reserves that was held in sterling, dollar, and other European assets. Russia has also been able to manage its trade with countries like China and India, despite all the sanctions. On the other hand, it seems that Russia does face problem in terms of trade in agriculture, for instance, because of not being within the SWIFT system. How much of a crunch situation is this for Russia to have a peace deal? Sorry.
I think for Russia, the peace talks with the United States is a freebie. It doesn't cost them anything. Russia's already made all the adjustments it needs to make. Russia has no expectations. There's nothing in the Russian budget or in the way Russia has organized itself that's contingent upon improving relations with the United States. In fact, the entire Russian posture assumes that there will not be good relations with the United States. And so when we speak of the potential of a betterment of relations, it's a freebie. It's sort of neat. Oh, good, that's something we weren't expecting. That's like going to Las Vegas and finding a $20 bill on the ground. Wow, I got $20. But you didn't budget for it. You don't need it. Russia doesn't need the United States at all. Zero. The world could be more convenient for Russia to an extent, but Russia has made it clear that the gains they've made are because they have walked away from the West. They have no need for the West. They've not planned on the West coming back. They've planned on going forward without the West. And so this is sort of like a jilted lover coming back into your life after, somebody's going out dating. They're like, well, you were nice, but we're not really getting back together again. I mean, you want to take me out to dinner? Okay, I'll go have a free meal. But no, there's no us anymore. There's no relationship here anymore. And that's where Russia is with the United States and the West right now. They don't need us. They don't want us. They didn't ask for this. Russia didn't come to the United States and say, please, please, please give us a deal. It's the United States that crawled to Russia and said, please, please, please give us a deal. And Russia's saying, okay, look, we can talk about it, but only on our terms. So for Russia, this is a nothing burger. Would they like to have better relations with the United States? Of course they would. The world would be a safer place with it. The United States would do well to have good relations with Russia, no matter what goes on with Ukraine, because it makes the world a safer place. But the idea that American companies are going to come roaring back into Russia, I would say that wherever a Russian company has emerged to fill the vacuum when American companies left the first time after 2014 and after 2022, Russia's not going to stab their own companies in the back. Russia's going to protect its market share. If the United States is going to come in, it'll come in on niche, items, niche areas where they're needed. I mean, I think Russia would allow Boeing to come back in, for instance. I know for a fact when I flew on the Boeing aircraft operating under Russian airlines, I was nervous about the front landing gear because they hadn't been maintained properly, and the parts that they were using to replace them were not original parts. And you're like, well, gosh, I mean, I'd sort of like to have the original parts here. So I think Russia would find room for Boeing in that, but not much else. Russia doesn't need the United States.
What about investments in general that has also been stifled by all these sanctions?
What investments?
investments through portfolio investment that is funneled through the Eurobond market, the
No
stock
one
market.
cares about the Eurobond market. China's investing in Russia. India's investing in Russia, and they do it outside of the European bond market. The direct investments. Go to Novosibirsk. Go to Ekaterinburg. Go to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum and take a look at all the Chinese and Indian companies lining up and look at all the contracts that are signed. Direct investment worth many, many billions of dollars. So I think Russia's doing just fine in terms of international investment.
I interviewed Professor John Mearsheimer recently, and I asked him, why do you think Trump is unable to seal the deal? And he said that there are three conditions that Russia is asking for. Of course, Ukraine not being a member of NATO, the four oblasts that Russia has now, Ukraine should give up its claim on them. And finally, a significant demilitarization of Ukraine to the extent that they have no offensive capacity. And he says that it seems like the Trump administration hasn't swallowed all the three at the same time. Can you talk about the last bit? What is the attitude of the U.S. administration towards a significant demilitarization of Ukraine? Is it still sending weapons to Ukraine?
My understanding is that the Trump administration has slowed things down to almost a halt. If there's anything going into Ukraine, it's the final vestiges of prior contracts, but there's no fresh contracting going on, et cetera. This is a political issue. This, again, comes down to Europe. For Ukraine to demilitarize, Europe is saying there must be a robust, system of security guarantees. The more you ask Ukraine to demilitarize, the larger the presence of peacekeeping troops must be. And Russia said, no, you don't get any peacekeeping troops, and Ukraine will be demilitarized down to 50,000. That's going to happen, just so you know. That's what happens when you lose a war, and Ukraine has lost this war. The stupidity of the Trump administration, and I say this because they don't understand that Russia will not yield on this. The U.S. has no leverage, no negotiating leverage to bring to bear. NATO made a fatal mistake. A lot of people tend to forget this. That started in 2015. NATO began training Ukrainian forces significantly to make them to NATO standards for the sole purpose of preparing them to fight against Russians in the Donbass and Crimea, in total disregard for the Minsk Accords. So from the Russian perspective, the Ukrainian military today is an extension of NATO. Therefore, it must disappear. And it will disappear. It can either disappear by being transformed from troops on a parade ground into troops into a graveyard, or they can voluntarily demobilize and be left with 50,000 border guards. But Trump hasn't been able to turn to the Europeans or get his representatives to turn to the Europeans and tell them to pound sand. And one of the problems is that the United States is part of the problem. We built this army. We're the ones who put all that money into it. We're the ones who created the training command. We fronted for NATO. And we've been a heavy supplier of these munitions. And no matter what Trump says that this was Joe Biden's war, this is Donald Trump's war.